Emma and a Spirit's Valentine? What do we know about what love on Valentine's Day can be? It can be extraordinary like this story. Well, let's look at what can happen on Valentine's Day. One snowy February afternoon, Emma, an attractive young woman, stood at the door of her store and regarded the sign above it with satisfaction. The store's ivy-covered facade was adorned with an elaborately carved wooden sign depicting a book, the moon, and stars. The store was on a small street in the old town, where a tiny car could barely squeeze through. The walls of the houses, built centuries ago, still held their fortress, and seemed as solid as if they had been built forever, as solid as the medieval fortress that was the center of this old town. Emma's store, Ethereal Trinkets, was a haven for the living and the dead, an enchanted oasis on a winding cobblestone street. The store's frosted glass windows were illuminated by faint glimmers of light, luring passers-by to step inside and discover its secrets. Emma pulled a massive, old-style key from her purse and unlocked the store's front door. The door opened completely without a creak, its hinges were well-oiled, and the silence added to the store's mystery. When she crossed the threshold, she had entered another world of mystery, magic, and hope. The storeroom radiated a warm, otherworldly charm. Soft golden light penetrated through vintage stained glass sconces. Every corner seemed alive and magical. Shelves with carefully arranged knickknacks stretched to the ceiling, holding treasures from different eras, fragile porcelain figurines, tarnished pocket watches, and jars of iridescent powders shimmering with blue and silver hues. The air was scented with handmade candles, each minor masterpiece of wax and wicks, infused with mystical blends of herbs and oils. Lavender and chamomile soothed the senses, while sandalwood and clove brought thoughts of mystery. Dainty bunches of dried flowers and herbs, sage, rosemary, and marigold, hung from the wooden beams, creating a tapestry of earthy hues overhead. Shelves of books in dark bindings occupied almost the entire space of this small room. Despite the other trappings, which were virtually magical, books were still the main thing in this room. Near the corner of the room, there were cushioned armchairs and a low table, on which were scattered tattered books on folklore, spirits, and forgotten rituals. Emma walked over to the counter against the far wall of the store and placed a bunch of keys on it. The woman looked around contentedly and turned on the light. A soft yellowish light flooded the room, and it became apparent that to the left of the counter, Emma was standing at another door leading away from the room. The young woman walked to this door, opened it, and left the store. Emma stood in the middle of a tiny room, the centerpiece of which was a small round table draped in dark purple velvet, with gold constellations embroidered. The woman walked to the table, lovingly stroked its velvet tablecloth, and sat down, placing both hands palms down on its surface. Emma closed her eyes. It was as if she were meditating, so immersed in herself. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows that seemed to whisper their own stories. Behind the table was an antique cabinet filled with fragile crystal balls, aged tarot cards, and vials with names like Tears of Moonlight and Essence of the Veil. This was where Emma held Ouija sessions and readings for her clients. It was a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexisted, a sanctuary where Emma bridged the gap between the living and the dead, giving away one whispered secret at a time. For visitors, the shopkeeper would wind up an antique gramophone placed in the corner of this room on an old dark wood nightstand covered with a lace doily. The gramophone played quiet, haunting melodies. While people marveled at the store's beauty, the spirits found it irresistible. Emma often sensed their presence by the candle flames dancing without a breeze, and the subtle chill that spilled across the room. Some nights, the mirror hanging on the wall of this tiny room seemed to hold reflections longer than it should, as if glimpses of another world remained behind its glass. But sometimes, like now, she focused only on her senses, and spoke to spirits that no one else had summoned. Emma helped the living individuals to find comfort in what the souls of their departed loved ones and acquaintances communicated to them through her. To the spirits, she helped them simply talk to someone, especially if no one called them or expected them to appear. Such conversations in the store, surrounded by shelves of trinkets and the warm scent of handmade candles, helped the spirits find eternal peace and not disturb the living. This is how Emma lived the quiet life of an antique bookstore owner and medium. Her store was a haven for both living and dead souls. But today, something disturbed the young woman. She opened her eyes and looked around, puzzled. Her hands were still on the tabletop, but Emma's fingers involuntarily gathered around the folds in the velvet tablecloth to express her excitement at what she suddenly felt. An unfamiliar and apparently very restless spirit appeared right before her. It was a vision of a young man, a handsome but somber man in early 1900s clothing. The spirit held out his hand to Emma and bowed gallantly. His feet did not touch the floor, but he was visible to Emma at full height, and that, too, was unusual. Often, she had only seen the spirit's face and nothing else. "Daniel, my name is Daniel," the spirit said in a low baritone voice. Its gaze literally burned through Emma, though the apparition was utterly incorporeal. Emma, however, was not frightened at all and replied, "Okay, and my name is Emma." The woman sat calmly at the table and her hands were relaxed. She knew she had contacted the spirit and could control the situation. Daniel, literally hovering in the air in front of Emma, continued, "I hope you can help me. I'm looking for my fiancée, but I can't remember her name. Can you find her?" Such a request from a spirit was not unusual for Emma. She knew that not only did living people search for their departed family and friends through a medium, but vice versa. But it was so rare that Emma had only encountered spirit requests twice. She had helped them find their loved ones through many generations and centuries. But something about this Daniel disturbed Emma. "And who was she, your fiancé?" the woman asked quietly, looking the spirit straight in the eye. The one did not look away. "She is the most beautiful of all on earth." Emma grinned slightly in her heart, but did not give away her feelings. Yes, for lovers, their soulmate is always the most beautiful on earth as long as love is alive. Daniel's spirit was alive in this case, but Emma was unsure about his beloved. "Can you outline your love story, so I can figure out how I should look for your beloved or instead, her soul?" The spirit frowned. He only seemed to realize now that his beloved could only be in incorporeal form after all. Judging by his own clothes, he had been alive a couple or 3 centuries ago. However, the frown immediately disappeared from his face. Daniel moved closer to the table where Emma was sitting, leaned over slightly, and whispered, "I don't know. I don't know, otherwise I wouldn't have come to you." Emma was struck by his aura, calm yet magnetic. Despite the obvious mental anguish and uncertainty of the search, Daniel was full of positive energy. Emma sensed it immediately. She had a great sniff for problem spirits and for good ones. This Daniel was clearly one of the good spirits. Emma nodded and replied, "Okay, I'll try it, but I can't promise you anything. I have so little information about the one you're looking for that it obviously won't be possible to do it in one sitting." The spirit nodded in agreement and moved away from the table. He hung in the air again, but his posture and facial expression were now full of hope. Emma did not have time to say anything else before Daniel threw his hand up in the air and spoke, "Deal. So I'll come back and tell you more next time. For now, I won't bother you anymore. You need to do your usual things." Emma waved his hand lightly with forgiveness, and Daniel's image vanished. Emma was left with a strange feeling that this meeting would bring her something she had never expected from encounters with spirits. But the woman did not know what he was expecting and stood up from the table and gently smoothed the tablecloth over it. Emma left the Ouija room and returned to the counter of her bookstore. She was haunted by the image of Daniel and her conversations with him all day. These feelings gradually dissolved into her daily routine. When the first visitor opened the door of her store, Emma was already fully focused on business as usual. A week later, Daniel showed up at her door again. Emma found free time in her psychic schedule for him to show up and, once again, sat at her desk in the tiny room alone. She closed her eyes and focused on the image of Daniel, though, in time, it was no longer as clear as the first time the woman had seen him. she could tune in and summon the spirit to her. Daniel was in front of her again. The young man was still wearing the same old-fashioned clothes, a black tailcoat, with an off-white shirt and a white satin vest. This time, he had a white flower stuck in the buttonhole, as if Daniel were going to someone's wedding or on a date. Emma smiled at him affably, but in her heart, she felt some unusual excitement. But why do I care about him so much? I'm not even sure if I can help him find his love, she thought. At the same time, she made an inviting gesture to Daniel and pointed to a chair at the table directly across from her. Emma placed her hands on the table before her, now palms up. Daniel looked at her questioningly, and then suddenly and decisively covered her hands with his palms. Emma flinched at the electric shock that literally shook them both. What is this? This has never happened to me before, she thought, willfully leaving her hands from their previous position on the table. On the other hand, Daniel closed his eyes and continued to hold his palms over Emma's palms. Coming to her senses a little, Emma said, "There, we can begin. Tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And who was your lover?" Daniel told Emma the story of his relatively brief life among humans. He was an aristocrat and the last of his line. A very wealthy family had ended his lineage the moment he was killed in a duel while fighting for the honor of his bride and lover. After this session, Emma well understood who she was dealing with. That's where his refined manners and that impeccable speech come from, she thought, peering stealthily at the spirit as he told her his life story. She knew what had to be done, but this time, Emma could not see how she could help him find his love. However, during the following sessions, Emma saw fleeting memories from Daniel's past, moments filled with joy and pain in his heart. These feelings were strangely transmitted to her, but she chalked it up to her high sensitivity as a medium, nothing more. After a few meetings, Emma did not notice that her feelings for Daniel had grown from caring for him as a client to genuinely caring for him as a person. However, her feelings for him grew stronger and stronger. This feeling of caring for a troubled spirit suddenly filled her entire being, and was stronger than any bond she had felt before with any client. Emma realized that her work with Daniel had challenged her rule of never getting too close to spirits. Once again, Valentine's Day was just around the corner when Emma called Daniel to talk. Everyone around them was getting ready to congratulate their sweethearts. Emma alone could not concentrate on answering the invitations of the men who wanted to spend time with her at the cafe and get to know her better. All of Emma's thoughts were preoccupied with Daniel. After all, his visits to her were getting longer and longer. The last time they talked to Daniel, it was for almost 3 hours. Daniel's presence felt real to Emma. It was like it was connected to Emma's energy. Their conversations shifted from his lost love to more personal topics. Emma laughed and sharing parts of her own life. The line between their worlds blurred dangerously. In early February, Emma received a date invitation from Alex, an attractive man, a bachelor, and a regular at her store. When Alex, charming but overly persistent, asked Emma out, she hesitated. Daniel, previously seemingly indifferent to human affairs, suddenly showed signs of jealousy during another session, when Emma told him she was going on a date with a man tonight. His spectral energy crackled when he talked about Alex, making the objects in the medium's room and the entire store shaking. Emma wondered if her growing connection to Daniel was interfering with her ability to move on with her life, and she was consumed with guilt. This time, on the eve of her first date with Alex, Emma suddenly found something in Daniel's past that startled her. She delved into Daniel's memories and discovered the truth. Daniel's lost love, the woman he'd been searching for, was his great-great-grandmother Clara. Emma bore a striking resemblance to Clara, and Daniel's spirit appeared bound to her family since Clara's sudden death. Daniel's image shimmered with a pearlescent light when Emma told him that Clara had been her great-grandmother, and that he would never find her spirit, since Clara was happy. Her spirit was not troubled by anything in this life. Daniel lowered his head, his face sad. All strength seemed to have left him, and his image was almost ethereal, like smoke. Emma realized she was losing him. Yes, Daniel was not destined to find Clara, but he would meet her, Emma, the only person who could understand and accept him. This revelation stunned Emma, and she realized she could be the woman Daniel needed. Emma, realizing this, choked with despair at the tears that suddenly flowed down her cheeks. She learned this discovery had brought her hope and despair, hope for her love for Daniel, and his reciprocal feelings for Emma, and despair at the impossibility of it all. Looking at Daniel, suffering from the realization of the futility of his search for his lost love, Emma faced an impossible choice: help Daniel find peace at the risk of losing him forever, or hold on to him at the risk of binding him on the world of the living, which could slowly destroy his spirit. While Emma was talking to Daniel, the store's front doorbell rang. It was Alex coming into the store. He had a bouquet in his hand, and the man was dressed smartly for a night out at a restaurant with Emma. Emma, anticipating Daniel's reaction to Alex's visit, ended this session quickly, and Daniel's image disappeared. But there remained in Emma's soul the lasting pain of rejecting the possibility of at least a spiritual union with Daniel. As the young woman slowly rose from the table and spread the purple velvet tablecloth on it again, thoughts raced through Emma's mind. Is my spiritual connection with Daniel real? Or is it a projection of loneliness? Can I truly love a spirit, knowing that we will never have a normal life? The attraction between the incorporeal and the physical was becoming unbearable for Emma. Throughout the evening Emma spent in casual conversations with Alex. The woman did not leave, wondering what she should do about her attraction to Daniel's spirit. As Alex talked about himself, mostly praising his ability to make money and provide for his family, Emma suddenly solved her dilemma. Yes, Alex was a very down-to-earth, materialistic man. Women would be happy to have such an admirer and possibly a future life partner. But no, Emma. She had one last Ouija board session with Daniel and set the record straight. Emma held one last Ouija board on Valentine's Day to help Daniel move on with his life. Daniel appeared in front of her, as usual, but this time, he was wearing a peculiar type of clothing. The young man wore a white tailcoat, a white vest, and a white shirt. A red rose was inserted in the tailcoat's buttonhole. Emma had never seen him so handsome before, which made it almost impossible for her to resolve her doubts and possibly end their encounter. Emma sighed as Daniel reached for her, taking her hand in his palm. It was an unusual gesture for him, as he usually only touched Emma's hands with his disembodied hands when she urged him to do so at the beginning of a séance. Emma closed her eyes and listened to the rapid beat of her heart. A blush flooded her cheeks, and the woman's lips quirked open. Emma opened her eyes and realized that Daniel's face was so close to hers that her breath almost touched his skin. The spirit looked the woman straight in the eyes. His lips were beautiful but unavailable for kissing, and his dark eyes were as bottomless as night lakes. Emma shuddered and pulled away from Daniel. The spirit did not let go of Daniel's hand. Her palms were pressed by some invisible force against the table. Emma couldn't break the séance now, even if she wanted to. But she did not want to. She needed to feel Daniel's presence close by, and know that he needed her. Emma suddenly realized that she loved Daniel. And him? What about him? Daniel suddenly let go of Emma's hands and was beside her. Getting down on one knee, the spirit asked in a heartfelt voice, "So you love me? Answer me." How could he possibly know that? But I just realized it myself. This thought proved no obstacle to Emma. The woman, barely enunciating the words, replied, "Yes, I love you. Do you? How do you feel about me?" Daniel was already right in front of her. His face was so close that Emma had to close her eyes to keep from trying to touch his lips. "Me? And you're still asking?" Daniel shrieked. Can't you see how much I need you? You gave me something I never thought I could feel again. Don't you feel how glad I am to see you every time you wanted to summon my spirit?" Emma suddenly realized that he had said, "my spirit," and or rather, who was in front of her now? Was it not a spirit? The woman opened her eyes and stared directly into Daniel's eyes. A genuine man was in front of her now, as if made of flesh and blood. Only the unusual halo of light that enveloped him betrayed something not of this world about him. Emma reached out and touched Daniel's cheek. She could feel that he was flesh and blood, but how was that possible? Daniel, looking affectionately into her eyes, answered her unspoken question. "Anything is possible in our imagination. If you will live a life where your ordinary life is separate from the world we can create together, then decide whether you are with me." Emma put her arms around Daniel's neck and touched his forehead with her forehead. Their skin was hot as fire. "Yes, I agree. I agree to live in an imaginary world no matter what. You are worthy of it," the woman replied. Daniel touched his lips to hers. The lovers' breaths merged, and everything around them ceased to exist. Their world was imaginary, but it was more real to them than the material world. Yes, love can do anything, and our dreams come true, just as Daniel and Emma's dream of finding love came true. The end. Written by Misha Quinn, January 2025. Copywriting by Misha Quinn, 2025.